So this is CJ Baker, and every day I've been listening to a different randomly generated album that appears in the book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And I just finished my 6th week. So just like I did in the previous week, I'm gonna record a recap video. So most of it's just gonna be clips of the reviews that I previously posted, but those reviews were originally posted as 3 minute shorts. So in some cases, the reviews are gonna be extended and are gonna include some bonus material. And then afterwards, I'll give my updated rankings and I'll give some general observations about this week. So if you want me to keep making these videos, please like and subscribe and please enjoy. So today's randomly generated album is Rapture by Anita Baker, released in 1986. So this is a smooth soul, also lumped into the quiet storm subgenre. And it is a genre that I'm not necessarily fully into. Like I generally like my storms a little bit louder, and I generally prefer my soul and R&B music with a little bit more grit. But it's hard to deny that Anita Baker, she has a really gorgeous singing voice, and musically, it is very competent and very polished. And that's almost my issue. It's almost too polished for my personal taste. Like, I just like things just a little bit more raw musically. But we'll get right into it. The album opens with the song Sweet Love, which is I would say, probably the most well known tune on the album. And it is, it's very pleasant and it's very pretty, but it's just something that I don't necessarily fully connect to. But it'd be the type of thing that'd be nice to have in the background in a dinner party. And I could basically just cut and paste what I just said and apply that to the entire album. It's very pleasant and very pretty and really good background music. There's a couple of songs that the musical arrangement is a bit dated and it very much sounds like it came from the 80s. But yeah, for the most part, there's not too much negative I can really say about the album, except for the fact that it's just not necessarily my cup of tea. But I do have a lot of respect for Anita Baker, and I can see why this is considered to be an important album. So I'm not going to hate on it. I'll give it 3.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Pearl by Janis Joplin, released in 1971. So this was Joplin's second and final album, which was released posthumously. So tragically, she died at the age of 27. And Joplin is someone that I'm a fan of, and she definitely has a very powerful and distinctive singing voice. And it's one of those, when you listen to her sing, you can definitely feel the hurt and the pain that she's going through. Like she sounds like someone who's lived a hard life. But yeah, we'll get into the album. The album has really strong bookends. It opens with Move Over, so really strong, solid opener. And it closes with Get It While You Can, which is a very powerful, emotional song that basically gives me chills listening to it. There's a few songs on this album that give me chills, such as the second track on the album, Cry Baby, another example of the emotional tune where you can really feel the hurt and the pain that she's going through. And then my favorite song on the album, Me and Bobby McGee, which was written by Chris Christopherson, who I don't think always gets enough appreciation as a songwriter. And Christopherson was a masterful lyricist, and there was even some gorgeous poetry within his lyrics. But yeah, along with being a well-written song with powerful lyrics, this also shows a different dynamic to Joplin's vocals. Because she was such a powerful vocalist, quite often she would go full tilt with her delivery, like she would turn up the volume to like Spinal Tap 11. But in this case, she shows a bit more restraint. And there's also beauty and power within that restraint as well. So yeah, this song also gives me goosebumps, and it's just an absolute gorgeous tune. And it's another song I want to mention because it also shows a different dynamic to Joplin is Mercedes Benz, which also shows Joplin's humor side. And I also personally kind of connect with the song because I actually have one of my nieces when they were younger, probably about 7 or 8 years old, used to sing this song. I think dad taught it to her. And it's kind of adorable listening to like a 7, 8 year old singing the lyrics to this tune. But yeah, overall, just a solid album. It's hard to listen to this album without feeling something emotionally. I give the album 4.5 stars. So today's randomly generated album is Sometimes I Wish We Were an Eagle by Bill Callahan. Prior to using his real name, he's also previously recorded under the name Smog. And I have listened to like one Smog album before, but it's just something I never super got into. So on the random generator site, they had this listed his country, which I don't think's really an apt description. I think it's more described as indie folk, definitely lo-fi. Like when I'm listening to it, I kind of feel like I'm in the guy's bedroom watching him record. It's almost like I should be charged with breaking and entering. But yeah, but it does kind of give it an intimate feel, and I mostly like the vibe of it. Vocally, it's very much like a sing-sung approach, and I can see his voice potentially being divisive. But for the most part, I don't have an issue with his voice. Like, I think he does do a good job conveying his lyrics. But yeah, we'll get into the album. So I like the opening track, Jim Kane. I like the vibe of that. I really like Too Many Birds. That's a highlight. And then probably my favorite song on the album is All Thoughts Are Prey to Some Beast. And I really like the dynamic build of that song. The only song on it that I'm not particularly into is the closing track, Faith Void, which is about 9 minutes long and it gets really repetitive. So if I was to keep it on the album, I probably would cut it in half and then maybe sequence it a bit different so you're not closing with the track. But the album's long enough that you don't even need that song on the album. There's not really a need for any fill. The only other minor issue I might mention about the album is mood wise, it does become one note. So, at least with myself, it was easy to start losing my focus a bit. So, I think it is kind of one of those albums you might have to be in the right mood and headspace for. But overall, it was still an enjoyable listening experience. So yeah, I like the album. I give it 4 stars. Today's randomly generated album is the self-titled debut by The Clash, released in 1977. And I do love The Clash, and I do love this album. This album is basically my second favorite album by The Clash. I'm sure at some point we're going to talk about my favorite, but we'll get right into the albums. It's all cure, no fill. Open strong with Janie Jones, a catchy tune, definitely a certified banger. I also enjoy I'm So Bored with the USA, also really catchy. Another highlight is White Riot, which was written in response to the 1976 Notting Hill Carnival riots, which Paul Simeon and Joe Strummer were involved in. Those riots were in response to London's Caribbean residents being victims of police oppression. This song is about right passiveness. Other highlights, we got London's Burning, really catchy career opportunities, also really catchy song. And then I also love the cover of Junior Mervin's Police and Thieves, and even how they incorporate reggae into the punk sound. That would go on to be really influential as well. Like, for example, it would have an influence in the formation of the second wave two-tone skull revival that took place like in the late 70s, early 80s. And then it also would have definitely had a factor in the development of ska punk. You could definitely hear how they would have had an influence on bands like Operation Ivy, which of course came to formation of Rancid. So you can see how they influenced bands like that as well. But yeah, absolutely love this album. 5 stars. You can definitely understand why they've been referred to as the only band that matters. So yeah, that promotional tagline given to them by the record label might sound exaggerated, but at certain moments they actually nearly reach those impossible heights. And that was actually displayed on this album. Like they were able to tackle social political issues in a meaningful way. But then there was also the fact that despite being signed to a major label, they were able to stick to their ideals. Like for example, they always made sure that the albums they released, even when they were double, triple albums, never exceeded a certain price point. They always made sure that the merchandise and concert tickets were affordable. So yeah, they were definitely a band that always stuck to the conviction. So this is definitely a very important debut album. And from there they would even exceed Loftier Heights. So yeah, like I said, absolute classic. So today's randomly generated album is Kid A by Radiohead, released in 2000. So this is the second Radiohead album that the random generator generated. This was the follow-up to OK Computer, which I love OK Computer. It's like an all-time favorite album for me. So let's just say when this album came out, I was initially really anticipating it, but my initial reaction was I was disappointed. So there was definitely a disconnect. It was a little bit more experimental than OK Computer. And the thing about OK Computer was the perfect album because it did contain experimental elements, but it got that balance just right. So it was still accessible at the same time. Where in this case, my initial reaction was that the band has lost the plot a bit. But yeah, there were certain things they do, and I came across they're doing it more because they could, not because they should. But as time passed, my view of the album has changed. It's still not one of my favorite Radiohead albums. Like I did a Radiohead tier list video, and I had this as my sixth favorite Radiohead album. So even that I realize is a bit of a hot take because this album is widely regarded. But there's still some songs I really like on the album. I do like the opening track, everything in its right place. There are some songs on the album that kind of illustrate why I have a tough time with the album. Like one of the songs, the national anthem. It's a song that I find a little bit frustrating because at its core, it's actually a killer too. It has like a really cool riff to it. I love Tom's vocals, but the song starts to meander and then it starts to do a bunch of different artsy fartsy stuff that just doesn't seem to be necessary. But there are other songs on it that I love. How to Disappear Completely, absolutely gorgeous tune. I love Motion Picture Soundtrack. And then my favorite track on the album is Idiotech, which is about climate change, which is a subject that Tom York has written about on multiple occasions. And this is an example of how the experimental elements work. So it samples a couple of computer based compositions and just the way that they incorporate these elements. It contributes to an ominous sound that really contributes to the theme of the tune. So yeah, there's still some really good songs on it, and my view of the album has definitely evolved over the years. But there's still a bit of a disconnect. But it's not a bad album. I give it 3.5 stars, and I apologize to Radiohead fans. So today's randomly generated album is Scream, Dracula, Scream by Rocket from the Crypt. released in 1995. So the lead vocalist of Rocket from the Crypt was also the lead guitarist of Drive Like Jehu, which Drive Like Jehu's 1994 album Yank Crime I also reviewed as part of this exercise. The two bands definitely have two distinct sounds. Like Drive Like Jehu was like post-hardcore emo, where this is kind of like garage punk. So I would say that this is a bit more accessible than Drive Like JU, but overall I prefer Drive Like JU because it's a bit more interesting. And I prefer the lead vocalist of Drive Like JU. I do like his voice better than John Way's. So I'm not necessarily a big fan of the vocals on the album. And as far as the album goes in general, it's one of those albums. There's not too much I can say about it, either good or bad. Like, there's no songs on it that I hate, but there's nothing on it that I love. Some of the songs also feature saxophones, so some of the songs kind of remind me of like a alternative rock version of like Bruce Springsteen and the East Street Band, probably most notably Young Livers. But I do think there's bands that have done that sound better. Like you got bands like The Hold Steady. I love The Hold Steady. They're basically like Husker Du meets Bruce Springsteen. And then you got a band like the Gaslight Anthem, which owes an obvious debt to Bruce Springsteen, but the music's really good. But Rock from the Crypt does predate those bands. So yeah, it's music that I'll just describe as fine. It does start to drag a bit. It can be a bit bland, but there's nothing on it that I hate. So yeah, it's fine. I give it 3.5 stars. We don't have too much else to say about it. There's nothing on it that I would put on a playlist. But if the algorithm selected one of these songs, I wouldn't be quick to change the tune either. Well, today's randomly generated album is Underwater Moonlight by the Soft Boys, released in 1980. So this is a UK post-punk band featuring Robin Hitchcock. And I'm also a fan of some of Hitchcock's solo stuff as well. This album could also be considered influential in the development of neo psychedelia and also in jangle pop, and even in connection with those jangle pop elements. It is interesting to note that OEM has cited the Soft Boys as an influence. You could even see how the sound would influence a band like the Smiths. But yeah, getting into the album, it has really strong bookends. Opens with I Want to Destroy You. So that's a really strong tune with some really good jangly elements as well. And then the closing track is the title tune, Underwater Moonlight. Definite highlight as well. And then my favorite song on the album is probably Queen of Eyes, which is really pretty. And there's other songs I like too, like Positive Vibrations, Insanely Jealous of You. The only song I'm not too keen on is Old Pervert. Especially lyrically, it's kind of cringy, but even musically, I just don't fairly connect with it. And then another song I'm kind of on the fence about is I Got the Hots, which is also a bit cringy, especially lyrically, but it is kind of quirky and amusing and kind of catchy. It's still overall a solid album. And as I mentioned, you can definitely see how it would go on to have an influence on a number of different artists, especially in the development of like 80s alternative and even like in like 80s college rock, like we already mentioned with REM. So it would go on to influence a number of different acts that were important in the development of alternative music. So yeah, solid album. I give it 4 stars. So this concludes the recap. And overall, it wasn't a bad week. There was like one new 5-star album, and nothing was below 3.5 stars. But we'll get a little bit of an update of the rankings. We'll see where we're at. So not too much change in the top or the bottom, but as we mentioned, we got one new 5-star album, The Clash. So we're now up to a total of 9 5-star albums. So the Downward Spiral, Odelay, Blue by Joni Mitchell, Elephant by White Stripes, Pink Floyd's The Wall, mentioned The Clash, Bob Dylan's Bringing It Back Home, and Pink Moon by Nick Drake, and then Radiohead, Hail to the Thief. And then we'll just quickly scroll down here. Just get the updated list here. So yeah, not too much changes as far as the bottom goes. So bottom two, the only two that will be below 3 stars, King Crimson and Nina Cherry. So of course the question now that we ask every week, do these albums deserve to be in the book? 1,001 albums you must hear before you die. And of course, there's always that caveat that you could choose not to listen to any of these albums and you're going to live a perfectly happy life. Or potentially you could live a perfectly happy life, because it's also possible that you're a miserable SOB, because I don't know you. But yeah, but ultimately the question is, are these essential albums, are these essential, definitive, important albums? And I think in this case, you can make an argument that the albums I listened to this week belong in the book, even the ones that I kind of were just okay to me. I can kind of see how they potentially could have been influential. So this week I don't have any issues with any of the albums that were included. So you can let me know what you think. So the albums I listened to this week, did you like them, hate them, somewhere in the middle? What did you think of my takes? Do you think I'm an idiot? Please let me know in the comments, but please do so respectfully. And if you want me to keep making these videos, please like and subscribe. And you can also check out my website, ongoinghistoryofprotestsongs.com. And also, I want to mention that in order to record and edit this video, I used Riverside. So Riverside has a number of different tools that makes the recording and editing process easier. And they also have tools for webinars and podcasts as well. Also, one thing I definitely appreciate about Riverside is it's really quick to upload on multiple social media platforms as well. So in the past, it used to take me, sometimes it would take me hours to upload a video on YouTube. And now it's a matter of seconds. So it definitely streamlines that process. So if you're a content creator and you want to try something different, you can feel free to try Riverside for free. And I will include the link in the description. So thanks for watching. And please stay safe.